Hi, everybody.
Welcome back to Two Peas in the Kitchen. We are back now because of Valentine's Day, and this is the perfect dish to make for your loved one.
So what we are making today is actually one of our favorite chefs, Ina Garten, Barefoot Contessa. She does a beautiful beef bourguignon, which is a classic Julia Child's French dish. Normally it is done with a stew beef, and it takes all day to make. Ina Garten, Barefoot Contessa, does it with filet of beef. It literally is a weeknight meal, the way that she does it. Valentine's Day is on a Wednesday this year. So if you are looking for the perfect thing to make that seems really fancy, seems like you would have spent a really long time on it, this is it. Look how beautiful it looks at the end. We're going to show you how to do it, and you will not believe how easy it is.
Stay tuned. Okay, so in Julia Child's recipe, which is absolutely amazing, but it takes a long time, she uses a chuck roast or stewing beef. You'll see it called that sometimes at the grocery store. And that takes a long time. It's a tougher cut of beef. In this recipe, so this is actually Ina Garten's recipe that we're making here, and it's absolutely delicious. And it's time-saving because we're using filet. So now we're going to sear our beef, and what you want to use is a heavy bottom pan. So here we have a Le Creuset brazier. This happens to be a 3.5 quart. You don't have to use this brand. Any heavy bottom pan will work. If you have a cast iron pan, that works wonderfully as well. What I would say is to avoid using just a thin stainless steel pan of sorts. And the reason you want to use a heavy bottom pan is because it'll conduct the heat more evenly, and it'll avoid hot spots within your pan, and you'll be able to sear the meat nice and evenly. You won't have any burning. Okay, so I've turned on the heat now for a couple minutes on about medium-high heat, just to heat it up. And now I'm going to pour about 2 to 3 tablespoons or so of olive oil. You want to make sure that your pan is nice and hot, otherwise your meat will stick to the pan. So make sure it's nice and hot. I'm going to pour in have my olive oil here. Just checking here. I do like to distribute the oil over the bottom of the pan and let that heat up for a little bit. You don't want to turn it on high and then have a lot of smoking occurring, especially with olive oil. We should be good here. So now I'm going to place, there we go. That's what we want to hear. Our cuts of beef, and you'll want to cook them on each side about 2 to 3 minutes on each side in order to get a nice brown crust. And what that does, the reason we sear, is it'll lock in the juices, and you'll have a nice moist cut of beef. Sometimes I do like to check and make sure that they're not sticking. And then just leave them, let them be for a couple minutes in order to get a nice brown crust, and then I'm going to flip them over and do the exact same thing. And one thing that I forgot to add, so this is actually a 3-pound piece of filet, and it's been trimmed. You can do that at the butcher or wherever you get your slice of meat. And beforehand, I use kosher salt and pepper on both sides before I braise it. So I think it's been about a couple minutes now. I'm going to flip our cuts of meat. You can see we have a nice brown crust on the side. I'm going to flip them over and leave them for another 2 to 3 more minutes. Yep. Okay, so after a couple minutes on each side, I'm going to take all the pieces of beef and put it on this plate, and I'm just going to set it aside while we do everything else, and then you'll see later we're going to throw it back in our stew.
Okay, so the next step in our beef bourguignon is we are going to add in a 1/4 pound of bacon. This is just high quality, uncured applewood smoked bacon. We're going to add it right into this same heavy bottom skillet where we had browned our beef. And do not add any more oil into this pan because, you know, the bacon will become very greasy, and we're going to get a lot of really delicious fat off the bacon. So I just have this like on medium heat, and we're going to let the bacon, I'm just going to separate all the pieces here. I've diced it. We're just going to let this cook for about 5 minutes until the bacon gets nice and crispy, and then we're going to take the bacon out and we're going to put it off to the side. Okay, our bacon is done cooking. We're going to remove the bacon from the pan. I'm just putting it, I like to take it out and put it on a paper towel just to get rid of, it'll absorb the excess bacon fat from cooking. And into this same pan, a few extra pieces here, do not remove the fat unless you really have a lot of excess fat. We just probably have about a tablespoon and a half of fat left here. And here we have 2 garlic cloves that we have minced with our garlic press. And we're going to put that right into the exact same pan where we have cooked the bacon. And this smells amazing. It's just going to cook right in that extra bacon grease. Smells delicious. And we're just going to let that cook for about 30 seconds and proceed with the recipe. Okay, our next step is actually my favorite step of the whole recipe. We're going to deglaze our pan with a quality red wine here. We're using a Pinot, and the Pinot is just like our preference, and we're going to drink the rest of it when we're eating tonight, but you can use any quality red wine that you prefer. Deglazing the pan is a process. I'm going to start doing it while I'm explaining it to you, where you are going to get all of those delicious sticky pieces, the caramelized bits off the bottom of the pan while the wine is heating up in the pan. And the other thing that deglazing does is it will very quickly remove the alcohol flavor from the wine so that you'll be left just with a very rich, delicious wine sauce that only has the wine flavors and not the more alcohol tones from the wine. So you can see as I'm deglazing here that all of those sticky caramelized bits, let's see if I can get you a little view in there, are being removed and stirred up off the bottom of the pan while this is, and actually I can smell while this is happening the alcohol kind of flavors from the wine cooking off. You can just smell it in the kitchen right now while that's cooking. So we're just going to keep stirring that and let that kind of briskly simmer here for a few minutes, and we'll proceed with the recipe. And by the way, I was thinking about drinking the wine and not giving you the measurement of the wine. That was 1.5 cups of wine that we added into the recipe. And like I said, we are using a really nice Pinot, a Pinot Noir for this recipe, but you could use a Chianti. I think Ina Garten, whose recipe we're following here, also mentioned you could use a Burgundy, but I think any really nice quality red wine will do just fine. And by the way, I was thinking about drinking the wine and not giving you the measurement of the wine. That was 1.5 cups of wine that we added into the recipe. And like I said, we are using a really nice Pinot, a Pinot Noir for this recipe, but you could use a Chianti. I think Ina Garten, whose recipe we're following here, also mentioned you could use a Burgundy, but I think any really nice quality red wine will do just fine. Okay, we're going to proceed with the rest of our recipe now. This is 2 cups of beef broth. And our preference for this recipe and for a lot of our recipes is we use the better than bouillon to mix in with warm water to create a really rich, delicious beef broth that we use all the time. So I'm adding in 2 cups of that. The other thing that's really great, a little bit left in here, I don't want to miss any of that yumminess. The other thing that's really great about using the better than bouillon product, which we really love, is that it keeps for a really long time. I think that this jar we just pulled out keeps all the way until like the middle of 2025. So it's like a year and a half. It's just a great thing to keep in your cabinet if you don't have any homemade beef broth. We don't make beef broth very often, so this just works really well for us. Of course, you can also buy any beef broth in a carton or a can, and that would work just fine. So we're going to just let that meld here with the wine that we use to deglaze the pan. And then we're going to continue on adding in, this is a tablespoon of a good quality tomato paste. And a good quality tomato paste really does make a difference. You want that really good flavor that you're going to get from that. And in addition to that, I'm adding in a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground pepper. I'm not adding in the full amount of salt. We don't like to do that of what's called for in the recipe from the get-go. You can always add extra salt, at the end or when you get closer to the end. Because this recipe has bacon in it, which is so salty, I just think we feel we have a little more control over how salty the final dish is by not adding the full amount at this point. So now we're just incorporating here the tomato paste and the wine, the beef stock. You can see the garlic in there. And the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna throw in some nice sprigs of thyme here. This comes from Rafi's greenhouse. And we're gonna let that all incorporate and simmer. Okay, so now that we've incorporated all of these ingredients, this is gonna simmer. I've turned up the heat just a little bit to get a little bit of a faster simmer going here. This is gonna simmer uncovered, very important, do not cover the pan, for approximately 10 minutes. The reason that we're cooking it uncovered is this is gonna start to reduce. We want some of that water and the rest of the alcohol to cook off. If you cover it, you won't have that same result. So again, you can see I've turned it up here. We're starting to get a little bit of a faster simmer, and we're gonna let that go for about 10 minutes. We're gonna watch this reduce, and then we'll be back to continue with the rest of the recipe.
Okay, so while this is simmering here, we can make our mushrooms. So here we have half a pound of just plain white sliced mushrooms. You can use any mushrooms that you like. And we're going to add about a tablespoon of butter. You just have some leftover, the rest of this butter here. And if you put in a little more, that's okay. That's my philosophy with butter and also with olive oil. About a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. I'm just going to freehand it. It's about a tablespoon, maybe a little more. You really get beautiful flavors with both the butter and the olive oil. And I'm just going to wait for this butter to completely melt. And I'm going to then add our mushrooms and let them cook for about 10 minutes or so until they're nice and browned and cooked all the way through. And then you can reserve those on the side until we're ready to add it back into our pot. Okay, so now our broth has been simmering for a while. The main thing is you want to remove your thyme sprig. You can also, this is optional, the rest of it. Here's our thyme sprig. You don't want to eat sticks. So we're going to go ahead and take that out. And the rest of it's optional. You can strain all of it if you want to. If you want, the chunks of garlic still left in there, that's perfectly fine. It's personal preference. I'm just going to go ahead and lightly strain the broth here. You can see there's, some little tiny chunks of beef in here. I'm just going to do that. You don't have to go too crazy. Just do it to your liking.
Okay, so now our sauce has been strained and it's been simmering for about 10 minutes. We're gonna go ahead and add our veggies. So this is about a half pound. This is just pearl onions, which I have peeled. You don't slice them or anything, you just put them in whole. And then we're gonna add in, these are just carrots that I've sliced on a diagonal in about inch thick slices. The recipe calls for about 8 to 10 carrots. This was about 4 carrots because I use really big, thick carrots. So you just have to sort of judge that to personal preference. And that's really just about how many carrots you want to have to serve with the recipe. If you want lots more carrots, you could add more, but this is gonna work just fine for us. So we're gonna get that in and we're gonna mix that around a little bit, kind of get everything covered in this delicious sauce. It smells so good. And then we're gonna let this simmer for about 20 to 25 minutes. The sauce will continue to reduce and the vegetables should be pretty much done cooking at that point in time.
Okay, now we're going to make a very simple roux, which is basically cooking butter and flour together. And the reason we make this and add it to our dish here is to thicken up the sauce a little bit. So it's very simple. I'm just going to take 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm just going to eyeball this. I'd say that's about 2 tablespoons. I've seen plenty of sticks of butter in my life. I think that'll suffice. And then we have 2, I'm going to let this melt right here in our little pan. And then I have 2 tablespoons of flour. And what this does, now you may ask, well, why don't we add the flour directly to our stew here? You could do that. It'll still thicken it, but you'll have that raw flour flavor. And so by cooking it here with the butter, it'll remove that raw flour flavor. So I'm just going to wait until all this is melted here, and I'm going to sprinkle our 2 tablespoons of flour right in, and I'm going to just use this whisk to incorporate it. So sprinkle it right in, and just use a whisk here to mix it all up together until it's well incorporated. And you can see it's thickening up too. So I'm just going to keep stirring. I think this is about right here. And now I'm going to add it to our broth. Directly to our pot here that has the broth, the delicious broth, and the carrots and onions. I like this pan because it has a little spout at the very, on the sides. Makes it easy to pour. Okay, so I'm throwing this in. All right, and next, I'm just going to stir everything in really, really nicely. And over the course of a few minutes, it's just going to thicken your broth.
Okay, so you can see after we've added our roux, our sauce is getting much thicker. So we're going to go ahead and add back in our bacon, which has all the fat kind of drained off on this paper towel. We're going to get our mushrooms back in. We're going to incorporate all of this. Let the flavors kind of melt a little bit, and then we'll be ready to get our beef back in for the last 5 minutes of cooking. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do, our last step here, is we're going to take our beef, our fillet of beef. These pieces are totally undercooked. Remember, we only seared them. You can see they're still raw on the inside, or undercooked on the inside. We're just going to really gently place these right into this delicious stew, and we will simmer that for an additional 5 to 10 minutes, and that is really depending upon your preference of how you like your beef cooked. If you like your beef more rare on the inside, you could do it for more like 5 or 6 minutes, and if you like it a little bit more cooked, then you probably would like it for a little bit longer. So we're just going to do that, and I will keep this on simmer and cover it for these last 5 to 10 minutes, and then just check it and make sure that you're not missing whatever your specific cook point is that you prefer.
We hope you've enjoyed this video.
We are so excited. We're going to go ahead and try this, and we're going to enjoy the balance of the red wine from the bottle that we opened, which is the best part of using half a bottle of a red wine in a recipe. And we hope that you'll try this. Leave a comment below if you do. This is one of our favorite fancy dinners, and we know you're going to love it just as much as we do. Cheers.
Cheers.